It's going to have a great conversation, and I want to get it started off with let's elaborate a little bit on that question or the point you just raised about storing the data. And one of the things I was wondering, and of course the rest of the panel can address this, but we'll start with you, the storage aspect of it. But where do you run the AI models as well? Is that part and parcel of what we're talking about here too?
Yes,
So yeah.
Exactly. So where you're running the AI models needs to be as close to that data source as possible. Introducing latency into the equation, moving things from the cloud, and et cetera, your AI will eat your lunch on your cost. Moving data transfer rates around is incredibly expensive over time, and we're talking millions, potentially like billions of gigabits of data being transferred between them. So we've really focused on bringing everything on-prem as much as possible. We have WWT bring AI in a box to us. And we plug that in.
I apologize. WWT?
Worldwide Technologies is one of our partners.
Okay, thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, they recently received like a $500 million cash infusion to work on their AI labs. And so they've been a great partner with us in working on pulling in their automations, their NVIDIA, recommendations, and then showing us how we should do that. And then from there, we've been able to take it ourselves and then kind of work on that and replicate that a bit. But without that initial kind of like front loading of the data inside of their location and then migrating it to ours, we wouldn't have learned what we could to make it a viable like investment on our side. We had to prove that first.
And so I want everyone else to elaborate on this as well, but they just brought up another thought and question. I mean, with all this great miniaturization and disaggregation and moving equipment out in the network and everything, there's a lot of space, at least in some of the incumbent operators that have lots of central office space with empty racks and things like that. And I'm just wondering, are there opportunities for self-hosting of this stuff? And go ahead.
I want to add one thing to what Cody mentioned. I think it's right. When you try to move data in and out, it's going to cost you a lot. Try going out of the load balancer from an AWS cloud, and you'll see that your bill will rise up for every one of those queries, right? So it's going to be key on where you store that data and what you use it for. A lot of people think, okay, big data is key, but do you need all that data?
That's very true.
Do you really need to bring all that data to where you need to do the inferencing? That's the key. And I think data engineering and making sure that the necessary data is required for your use case and bring only those relevant ones, because otherwise you're going to pay billions of dollars and it's not going to make a business case for you. And coming back to your, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the key of like a data washing, like I was saying, I worked at a weather company, and big data is part of the business. So you can go from a binning 1 minute bins, 5 minute bins. You can retain that data for 7 days. You can use AI to look at any changes in behavior. If it's all predictable, it's all common, you can start to process that out of the database. But there's a data cleansing aspect as well to all this processing. You can't retain all this data forever and ever and ever. And of course, the frequency of data being collected may be different between an agent or a 269 client. So it's just all the different periodics of what you're actually binning is and how you can actually then assemble that data and then find ways to optimally store it over time for historical purposes.
And I think you had a question about...
Yeah, it was. So is there an opportunity? I mean, given you have space, you have intelligence, literally, of people who are smart.
So, yes, but I think it largely depends on the service provider, because I have seen all variants, and Cody, you can provide your view as well. There are going to be service providers out there that are going to have concerns about security, privacy, and legal as well. And so they want everything together in one place. I do think that a distributed model would be interesting, but I'm not sure if it's going to fit everybody's needs. That's what I think.
Yeah, at our point, like what we've seen is that doesn't really match the cost savings for what we're trying to do, disaggregating that data, having it all in one location, like I'm saying, with the data rates, the transfer rates. I know we can do a lot with data engineering, like you're saying. I totally agree with that. But at certain points, we have to be careful about that, because you remove so much data, you mess up your own model. You're going to get the wrong idea about what to do. Yeah, so we really have enjoyed having it all in one location. We're spoiled to that. Not everyone can do that, but we're spoiled to that. We would recommend that. That's kind of best in breed for what we've done.
Phil, looks like you're ready to jump in.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, agentic AI is nice in that you can you can have agents that are domain specific and do some of the data cleaning in a disaggregated fashion, right? And then orchestrate that and only bring back the necessary information to correlate between the domains that are impacting whatever the issue is, right?
Right. Yes. But you have to know where to slice that data, right? That's the whole issue right now with us, and what we're learning right now is how do we properly slice the different vendors' data as it goes along. Maybe we should learn something from you guys. Maybe
I think in a way it's no different. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me. In a way, it's no different from when everybody went over like the cloud, right? When cloud came in 15 years, 20 years ago, and everybody said, "Oh, it's gonna be cool. I'm gonna put everything on the cloud, and my costs are gonna be like really dirt cheap." But then they'll start realizing how the cloud charges for every little thing, and then you have to start looking at like what Phil was saying as well. What makes sense to be close to you? What makes sense to be like somewhere else? So those are things that's architecture, right? It's beyond just network architecture. You have to look at data. It's like data engineering.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I'm sorry, I'm monopolizing the questions here. We've got a microphone. Of course, you don't have to use it, but it's very good for recording purposes. So if there are questions, please let us know. I mean, one of the things that I was intrigued about was this, of course, using external data sources, but you've got a data source. You know, this title was something about in the network, but I think, Eric, you kind of pointed out that the network really does extend into the home, and there's lots of great data sources. I'm really partial to OBE, UDPST. There's some really interesting things that the folks who are involved in that open source broadband project are doing with it to get data, understand latency and things like that. So maybe you guys want to touch upon that. Where does the home fit into kind of the longer term plans? You can start it, Eric, and I'll let
Well, yeah, it's really, again, you're looking at end-to-end services. What is the customer's experience at the end? And so, you know, Wi-Fi is a big part of that. Very few people actually connect into their gateways today. Wi-Fi has so many variabilities, dependencies on the actual client devices, one antenna, two antenna. So you just see so much differences. It may be an iOS, iPhone 6 out there, you know, some strange issue. So this is where some of the kind of the advanced fingerprinting to actually know the firmware being run on some of these clients. We personally had been working with an old, say a LiftMaster garage door. Anybody got a LiftMaster garage door?
Yeah.
Do you have problems trying to get that thing working? So you know, these are the things that help from the customer service perspective, is knowing what's actually in the home, protecting some of the IoT devices. You know, water software. We all look at the home experience down on the showroom floor. That's a lot of devices out there. A little scary to me, you know, if I have to have every single light bulb talking to me. But again, that kind of edge intelligence really is variable. So the more information you have on that, the more, you know, knowledge you have, topology, you know, predictability. So
I just want to follow up on one real world use case is with Mac rotation now. You've got all these security applications that don't work anymore.
Oh.
So being able to look at the traffic pattern for a given device to know that this new MAC address with a different IP is actually a different device that's already been on your network, it's a real problem. So that's an area where I've seen one of our partners make strides in trying to at least make some best guess that the device that's on the network is the old one that left the network when the MAC rotates. So. And the problem there is, if you don't know, then none of the security applications apply. You can't do parental controls. You can't do content filtering against that device. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Maybe a question for kind of Nokia, Ciena specifically, but as hardware vendors, you know, that are providing us service providers, you know, this hardware and thinking about AI, like what are you guys going to bring from a provider standpoint, you know, hardware provider standpoint? How are you going to get us? Are you going to train AI engines for us? And then, you know, are we going to get that as, you know, quote unquote a software package, a cloud, you know, service tool that we can then try to figure out how to integrate? How are we going to get? You know, we don't want to go train a service provider. I don't want to go train my own AI model. I'll get it wrong.
So real quick, are you a service provider?
Yes.
Excellent. So so just to repeat for those who couldn't hear it, basically is as a service provider, will the vendors bring the model, a trained model, and I'll let you three address that. Well, yeah.
Well, it's a very, very, very good question. And I've had some other service providers ask me that too, because like I said, it's very easy to say that if everybody says, okay, bring AI and everything will be solved magically, right? But there's a lot that happens. I mean, for AI, in order to be able to do anything for that matter, you need to have data, and not just data, you need to have good quality data. And guess where the good quality data comes from? From the service providers, right? So,
Well, and I don't want, I don't want to assume that I'm the best only service provider in the world. Like I learned a long time ago that I don't do things right, and there could be other things that
yeah,
there's
absolutely.
a whole lot more learning to come around.
Absolutely,
All our networks
yeah.
than my network.
Yeah, and that's true. And that's essentially, like I showed you some use cases, at least from Nokia's perspective, what we have been doing. And we partner with some service providers that have given us data that allowed us to collect some of data. And the good thing is you can anonymize it completely. You don't necessarily need to know that it's coming from your home or your home. It's completely anonymized. All we are trying to see is identify the traffic patterns and use that for our learning. And then we build models. Some of them are already pre-trained models. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to, again, retrain it to your network. Yes, maybe sometimes you need to, based on your characteristics. And that's usually something that we provide and offer as a service. But for most kind of applications that we work on, if we have enough quality data, you don't necessarily have to do it again and again. And even if you have to retrain it, it's not something that you do daily, right? I mean, I'm not a believer of online training at all. I think it does not scale. I don't know if anybody thinks otherwise, but that's where getting the data offline, making sure that that's quality data, because if you throw garbage into a machine, you're going to consume lots of cycles, and it's not going to produce good output. So that's essentially how we treat it.
It looks like Cody was kind of shaking his head there.
No, I agree. I completely agree. No, I completely agree. Go ahead.
Look, I can't add much. We're going to be collaborative, and you have to have real information for agentic AI anyway. So you'll get our RAG AI for our documents, for instance. That's going to be all fully trained. We're also going to open up our agentic AI models to APIs. So if you want to, enhance them with other information, you can use our APIs to use the models that are there that are trained. But it's always going to be collaborative. I don't see that there's any other way to do it.
Just a question back to you. From the service provider's point of view, how do you expect, like, what is your expectation from the vendors, like in terms of these AI models? Do you think they should be out of the box? Do you also see, like what Phil was saying, more collaborative, or?
Well, that's a great question. I didn't know I was going to answer it. But no,
That's going to.
I think that's what, certainly I'm trying to figure out is, I'm a firm believer that, given what we're seeing in AI and I think we've all seen what the tool can do and how much it can make us better, there's definitely going to be efficiencies there. There's going to be things to learn. It's going to help us find network errors.
Absolutely.
And hey, when that phone rings, I already know the problem with that customer, and I can help that tech support agent, get to the right resolution faster, or just to write it back. Everybody's network's unique, so I kind of see the other side of it in that you're going to have that AI agent and the model understand your network, whether that's through training or some other version, or we all have to get to the best practice and have really similar networks. Like, I don't know yet, but I know it's going to be really tough, and it feels like kind of a lot of extra effort if we all have to do it ourselves in our own networks.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's kind of back to my point of, sure we do the network this way, but we're all building over Ethernet, we're all building over PON.
Yeah.
Most of us in some version. That technology, those standards. I saw the network monitoring standards, IPFix, NetConf. That's all standards based. I hope we don't have to try to recreate that wheel of service.
Yeah.
Like we should get a good jump.
Absolutely.
A good head start on that.
Absolutely.
Somehow, I don't know
Yeah.
what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there needs to be starting data for that. And that's where we look at these seed service providers to provide us that data so that we could make these trained models. And yeah, it's always going to be collaborative. The more data that you have, the more closer it is to your network, the better it will be in terms of answering as well.
I think a lot of this is like anything else. As much time as you put into it is as good as it's going to work. You're going to have to put some work into it. Nokia and everyone can come with a model, but again, without training it on your specific data. And maybe that's where the focus really needs to be right now. It's not necessarily on the AI model. Sounds like Nokia, Sienna, these guys got this right now, but aggregating that data somewhere, figuring out where you can collect as much data as possible, as rapidly as possible, so that way when the AI models are offered to you, you can say, sure, here's my data.
Well, I think it's going to be an interesting point, given that, you know, your commentary around, you know, cloud transfer rates.
Yes.
And transfer allowances, and what you found that cost was, because, you know, we use cloud for certain stuff, and, you know, I don't even care about data rates. Our data transmit, you know, and receive is so low for what we do, it's such a fraction of the cost I don't worry about it. But again, if I got to send all my training data up, right, that's definitely a change in that equation. So
Yeah, like
you see how that, again, what do we get from service providers to help us jumpstart into this AI revolution?
So one thing, since we have 2 minutes, I would like to understand the thought here. I mean, we've got, you know, Broadband Forum members here who are contributing all the time to the standards and stuff, and we have the certification programs plugged. But I'm wondering, are there going to be opportunities to kind of create certification, create, you know, kind of that trust? Is that something that we should be looking at from a collaborative industry and making sure we can get the sources and yeah, well, maybe you guys can opine on that for 30 seconds each. And
my answer would be absolutely. Absolutely, definitely. I mean, my last slide was all about, you know, collaboration, openness, and making sure that we can work with each other. And standards play a very key role, and organizations like
and certification,
yeah, and
or
certifications
something.
as well. Yes, of course, interoperability and certifications also play a very key role.
Yeah, I mean, there's always room for good standards as long as they're open to extension, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the data elements that matter.
Mm-hmm.
And if every vendor is presenting the same data in different formats, different protocols, it's going to be much more challenging, I think.
Yeah, it's just you know, you have all these different similar systems like an ACS, a network management system. So going down with an SMMP or a Netconf Yang or, you know, however, and then take that up and kind of normalizing it with API calls to the devices. You may have OSS, BSS able to interop with many different systems. There are many different ACSs out there, obviously different platforms out there. So kind of stitching all that together through AI could be drive towards standards.
Yeah, there will definitely be like some revisions and standards that I can see from the work that we've done today. There do needs to be some certifications around this, and I would love to see like more models around the telemetry and the definitions of telemetry. And I think that's what's really holding people back right now is they're like, what data do you need? Well, give me all your data. Well, what data do you need? Well, give me all your data. Well, I don't know. You tell me. I'm just trying to operate my network, man. You know, and I think that's where we're going to see things change in the standard space. Is we're going to see more and more and more standards around what data we're collecting and how the data is presented and how the data is provided. You know, we're using a time series database to pull information from, you know, like an example is from every single data source we can. And then we use things like iTential to normalize that data across the board. But it'd be so much more powerful, and that's the problem right now is no one really has those resources to normalize that data across the board, and we need that. I think once we get there, AI is going to be so much easier to consume and be easier to trust because it's going to be so replicable. It's going to be so easy to replicate every time.
Excellent. Well, thank you, panelists. Thank you, everyone, for sticking it out, and really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much. And we can continue this conversation in Germany at our next members meeting and the Base Technical Summit, where we will be covering some of these topics, but it's going to be an ongoing conversation for a while. So thank you again.